Hello there and welcome to this week's edition of Money Matters, because I think it does and I'm pretty sure you do too. My name's Paul Smith, co-founder of Touchstone Education. I'm a property investor, been a property investor for 38 years now, portfolio worth more than 20 million, residential property, commercial property, I love all kinds of property. What I want to talk about this week is how you become wealthy through property. What does that actually mean? I've got a bit of a presentation for you. I want to ask you a question to start with. Where would you like to be 7 years from now? Now, as you possibly know, in biblical terms, 7 years didn't actually mean 7 years, it just meant a very long time. Let me just explain what I mean by wealth. Wealth isn't about money. Wealth is about having sufficient assets that pay you for not working, in order that you can spend your entire life doing whatever you want, with whoever you want, whenever you want. Because if you ask virtually anybody, stop somebody in the street and say, is time your most valuable asset? They'll say yes. Now, my question would then be, well, why does the average person sell their life at £12 an hour then? Because £12 an hour doesn't sound priceless. Why £12 an hour? Because that's roughly £24,000 a year, which is kind of the average salary. Might be 13, might be 15, might be 30, but I don't really care what it is. I don't want to sell my life by the hour. I value my time, my life, far too highly to want to exchange it for cash. So what I'd far rather do is have properties that pay me for not working, so I can do whatever I want. Let me give you the stats. This is the English Private Landlord Survey. Let's have a look at this. This is from 2018, which is obviously a government document. It says 4% of the population is a landlord. Well, could be 3%, could be 4%. They don't really include commercial, but let's go with 4%, shall we? Of that 4%, 45% have only got one property. Now, you can't live from that, can you? Because if it's a buy-to-let and it's making £300-400 a month, well, happy days, that's nice, but that's going to give you maybe £5,000 a year. Now, you can't live on £5,000 a year. The next 38% have got 2 to 4 properties. So we're now into the 80s, we're at 83%. 83% of landlords have got between 1 property and 4 property. 83% of the landlords have got half the property. The other 17%, roughly 20%, have got the other half. So where I want you to be is in that top 20% of landlords. So let's have a look at a bit more data. So this is from Deposit Protection. They say that there are 2.594720, 2.6 million landlords in the UK. But again, this is just residential landlords. And this is where it really begins to get shocking. Look at this. The average landlord earns £15,000 a year from property. Now, that's not a lot of money for what can sometimes be quite a lot of aggravation, you know, dealing with tenants, rent arrears and all that stuff. I really don't want you to be an average landlord. You're possibly watching this because you're interested in property investment, how to become wealthy through property. Well, if all you do is whatever the average landlord does, you ain't going to be wealthy. So there's the news. Sorry about that. It's actually only 4% of landlords that earn their full-time living from property. Let's have a look at one of our properties. Here it is. This is Dunera on the west coast of Scotland. It's an 8-bedroom house, lovely. We did a conversion from a nursing home to a residential property, and we now use it as a furnished holiday let. So there's its gardens. It sits in over an acre of gardens, which are very nice. And as you go through the front, there's a side gate and a front gate. As you drive through the front gate, you've got a nice little quiet road. Over the road, you've got a marina, and you're looking out onto the west coast of Scotland, onto the water. What I really wanted to share that with you for is, here's Dunera's booking calendar, and this is just for August 2021. And so this is with Sykes Country Cottages. So you can see there's only 4 nights left, okay? And we've still got a couple of months to go, so my hunch is it's probably going to get booked out for the whole month of August. And check out those rates. So £7,804 for 1 week, so more than £1,000 a night. Well, that's nice for you, Paul, but why is that relevant? It's relevant for this reason. Because in just one of our properties, in just 1 month, even if we don't sell out those last 4 days, which I'm pretty sure we will, our income is already £26,135. That's already in our bank, because obviously people pay ahead when they book a holiday. So we call this service accommodation, and the profit on one property in 1 month is £17,502 so far. Well, where's all the other money gone, Paul? Well, this isn't really a service accommodation video, but briefly, housekeeping, linen, utility bills, booking fees, because we don't do anything, it's managed for us, okay? Because that's the other aspect of wealth, isn't it? Wealth is where you get money for not exchanging your time. We pay people to do all that stuff, so we could make more if we did it ourselves, but we don't want to be greedy. We're quite happy with £17,500, one property in 1 month. Now that's quite a stark contrast, isn't it? Look at this. Average landlord, £15,000 a year from all of their properties. One of our properties, £17,000 in 1 month. That is the difference between being an average landlord and a professional landlord. Okay, what's your biggest challenge? I don't know what your biggest challenge is. Here are the top 4 from people that I normally work with. They're afraid. What if it all goes wrong? What if the world ends tomorrow? What if property prices crash? I haven't got any money. I don't have enough money to be a property investor. I need to know things. I need to know everything. I haven't got enough time. I could deal with all of those, but let's just deal with the last of them. I haven't got enough time. Now, if you're telling me that you haven't got enough time to become wealthy so you can have all the time in the world, that's precisely why you need to do this. So if you're sat there thinking, I'd love to be a property investor, but I don't have any time, have a good hard look at yourself in the mirror. Why haven't you got any time? And what is going to change in your life so that you will have time? Ask yourself powerful questions. The quality of your life will be determined by the quality of the questions that you ask. Okay, so if we're going to become wealthy, we've clearly got to do what other people don't. Warren Buffett says, to become part of the top 1%, you can't follow the 99%, obviously, because you're doing something different to what normal people do. But we're not even talking about the top 1%, we're talking about the top less than 0.2%, 0.17, so let's call it 0.2. You've got to do what 99.8% of the population don't do, okay? So you've got to challenge the accepted truth. So I'll introduce you to 3 mythical characters, and let's see if you can identify or if you know anybody like these people. So we've got Mr. and Mrs. Cash, Mr. and Mrs. Average Landlord, and Mr. and Mrs. Wealthy Landlord, Mr. and Mrs. Professional Landlord, if you like. And let's say that over the next 10 years, the average interest rate in the bank is 3%. Well, good luck with that, because it's, if you get 1%, you're doing well. So I'm rounding up here severely for Mr. and Mrs. Cash. So how much money would you earn interest-wise over the next 10 years on £50,000? We'll have a look at that. Now let's have a look at the average house. If Mr. and Mrs. Average Landlord took their £50,000, used it just as a deposit to go and buy a house. So not trained, just go to the estate agent and buy a house. Okay, so Mr. and Mrs. Cash first. There they go, on the way to the bank to put money in the bank, and they could put the money in the bank for 10 years. Compounding monthly, 3% annual interest. What that means is that by the end of the 10 years, there's the figures for you, the £50,000 will have become £67,196. But that's obviously not adjusting for inflation. So inflation will destroy the value of that money. So if you're really, really lucky, you might be able to stand still, but probably the interest rate is going to be underneath the inflation rate. So your money is actually going to be worth less in 10 years' time. Now, what kind of thought processes are going on in Mr. and Mrs. Cash's mind? Pay off the mortgage, be debt-free. Make sure that you've got money tucked away for a rainy day. That's why these sorts of people put the money in the bank. They're not really thinking, well, if I use my £50,000, what could I do with it? How could I generate a load of wealth? They're very conservative, they're very safe, and ultimately, sadly, they're never going to be wealthy. Unless, of course, they change their mindset, unless, of course, they change their behaviours. Let's have a look at Mr. and Mrs. Average Landlord now. So Mr. and Mrs. Average Landlord are going to use the £50,000 and they're going to put that as a deposit on a £250,000 buy-to-let property. The average house price, as I'm recording this, is roughly £250,000. And there's a good number of, well, there's loads of 75% loan-to-value buy-to-let mortgages out there. And there's a decent number of 80% loan-to-value mortgages as well. So let's say Mr. and Mrs. Average, they don't want to do any work on the property, they don't want to add any value, they don't want to upset anyone by negotiating on price, so they're just going to pay the £250,000 that it's advertised at, which obviously a trained professional landlord probably wouldn't. So what happens to their money over the 10-year period, the same 10-year period? Well, the £50,000, you clearly now start collecting rent. And I'm saying that the rent profit is £250 a month or £3,000 a year. I'm being pretty conservative here. And I'm also saying that you get 7% capital growth. That's the average growth that I have seen during the last 38 years that I've been a property investor. By the end of year 10, the
the property that you bought for £250,000 is now worth £491,000. So you've now got £291,000 of equity because, of course, you put in £50,000 of your own money in year one. Your £50,000 invested today is worth £321,000 in 10 years' time. Can I support that? Absolutely. Because I bought my first flat, 269A, Roman Road, East Ham, London, for £9,000 in 1982. That same flat today is worth more than £300,000. So if it was £10,000, which it wasn't, it was 9, but let's say for ease of argument it was £10,000, and it's now worth 300, which it isn't, it's worth more than that, that's a 30-fold increase over those decades. So property investment is a long-term play. Yes, you'll make some rental profit short-term, but with residential in particular, the huge uplifts are capital uplifts over time. So I'm guessing, if you're watching this far, you want to be like that third son in the parable of the talent. And this isn't about you being greedy. This is about you having sufficient wealth to look after yourself, your loved ones, and to make a real difference in the world. Because for me, that is the responsibility of all of us to become wealthy so that we can look after others in their time of need. So I want to give you a little example of a project that we purchased in December 2020. I'm going to give you the figures for it because I want you to be doing projects like this. So we're in Filey, Queen Street in Filey, so North Yorkshire coast, gorgeous area. And we bought a 2-bedroom flat and we turned it into a 3-bedroom flat. There's 3 areas where you add value. One is the price that you purchase it at. Second is how you repurpose it, what you do to it, how you add value once you've got it. And then third is how you extract that value at the end. Do you turn it into a buy-to-let, service accommodation? So those are the 3 areas where you extract value. So buy well is the first step. Well, what's this flat worth? Well, it's on the market for £169,000. This video isn't really about how to buy properties below market value, but we did buy it below market value. The point of this particular piece is to share with you what you can do once you're a trained professional property investor. There was actually no work required to this flat. This is the view from the end of the street. You can see it's gorgeous. So this would work as a buy-to-let or a service accommodation, furnished holiday let, if you like. Here's the lounge. You can see it's a very, very large lounge. It was a huge, huge 2-bedroom flat when we bought it. Already had 2 bathrooms. The people that were selling it had been badly let down by the agent, and it got to the point just before Christmas where they had to move, literally had to move at Christmas. And we bought it in cash in 3 weeks. And they were absolutely delighted. It was a win-win because they got what they wanted, but we got what we wanted, which is we purchased the property for £140,000. Now, they knew they were giving us a deal, but they were happy to do that because they needed the cash, they needed it quick, and they needed to get gone. So we purchased it for 140, even though it was on the market for 169. Here it is, in the middle of that picture, you can see the floor plan. So you can see a big bedroom number 1, slightly smaller bedroom number 2, and then you can see where the ensuite is and everything else. And it's as simple as this. Watch this. That's all we did. We split the lounge to create a big 3rd bedroom, and it's still a big lounge. So we've turned a 2-bedroom flat into a 3-bedroom flat. Okay, this one's in North Yorkshire, but I don't care where it is. If you take a 2-bedroom flat and turn it into a 3-bedroom flat, it's going to be worth more money. You know, and how much more money is all relative to whatever part of the UK you live in. This is the sort of stuff that a professional property investor does. So what are the numbers then, Paul? Okay, so this is a BMV, that stands for below market value, 2-bed to 3-bed flat. This is the project. So it revalued at the end, so we bought it for cash, did some work on it, and then put a mortgage on it at the end. So the end valuation was £210,000, as you can see here. The mortgage that we put on it was £157,500, with the total cost of purchasing, the legals, the stamp duty, the stud wall. All we had to do was put a bit of stud wall and do the decoration to create that 3rd bedroom. The total, everything together, was £146,500. So that means by the time we put the mortgage on it, we got all our cash back, plus an extra £11,000. And that's a very typical project for us. We do multiple of these per month. It was tenanted within a week, £850, mortgage is £460. Monthly costs, so what's that? Well, it's the letting fees, insurance, any maintenance we've got to do. We allow 20%, which is 170. So the monthly profit, £220 a month. Now, you can't live on that, but you can if you're doing one of those a month, because very quickly you'll have a very substantial portfolio. And every time you do it, you've got some extra tax-free cash coming out. It's tax-free because it's just mortgage, it's debt. You haven't sold it, so there's no tax to pay on that. In this case, £11,000. You remember, I'm sure, Mr. and Mrs. Cash, 50 to 67. Mr. and Mrs. Average, 50 to 321. Okay, what about Mr. and Mrs. Professional Landlord, Mr. and Mrs. Wealth? You invest your time, your money, your network in learning how to do this. And we at Touchstone Education would love to be part of that process if you feel that we're right for you. This is what's going to happen. Simply apply the basic principles, learn what it is that you need to do, find other people to help you do it, and then do it. So in this example, Mr. and Mrs. Wealth are going to buy, refurbish, remortgage using one pot of cash for 7 years. And then in 7 years' time, they're going to 3x it. So let's see if you'd like to be where Mr. and Mrs. Wealth are 10 years from now. So I'm going to talk you through this slowly. So here's the cycle. The average purchase price of properties that we're buying at the moment is £165,000. So step one, buy it, cash, £165,000. And you might be thinking, well, I ain't got £165,000 in cash. You don't need it. We can show you how to raise that as private finance. We've got investors all around the world that are delighted to invest their personal funds with us, cash, because we can give them a fair rate of interest. We pay 6.5%, and they can have first charge security on the property. So they're like the bank. There is no bank, so they are the bank, so they can have first charge security. So if for whatever reason we ever didn't pay them, they could repossess it. So they've got really, really strong security and a fair rate of interest. I'm going to take an average refurbishment where we've gutted it, rewired it, done loads of stuff to it for £35,000, just to get to a nice round number of £200,000. Typically, when we do that kind of project, it'll revalue at about 290 because we've typically added a bedroom, done an extension, we've added value in some way, and we've bought it at a good price. Our average mortgage is 217,500, which means the cash out at the end of that, so buy, refurbish, cash out at the end, is all of our money back plus an extra £17,500. And a typical property, the average property that we've got, will give us £500 a month, which is £6,000 a year. So that's buy, refurbish, cash out using a mortgage, okay? Cash out plus a little bit, tax-free. Now the question becomes, if you've got one pot of money, how many times a year can you do that? So again, I'll talk to our project team, and our average project takes 4 months. Sometimes it's a complete gut, sometimes it's what we call a fluff and buff. There's nothing to do really, bit of carpet, tidy up the garden and whatever. So on average, you should be able to use that same pot of money 3 times a year. Every time you do that, look at the figures. You'll create £72,500 worth of equity. You'll pull out, if you do it like we do it, 17.5 grand extra tax-free cash, and you'll increase your cash flow by £6,000 a month. So in terms of wealth per year, that property, in that first year, the wealth that will create is £96,000 if you do that 3 times, because of course you've got a 4-month cycle time. Money in, out, do it again. Money in, out, do it again. So you've got 2 pots of money, you can do 6. But if you assume you've got 1 pot of money, you can do 3. So by year 7, you've now got 21 houses, because you're just recycling your money and getting a little bit extra every time. So if I do those figures for you at the end of year 7, and this is so miserable and pessimistic, because this assumes 0 capital growth, which of course is complete nonsense. You will get some capital growth, but let's not argue about how much. Let's assume nothing for now. So your equity at 72,500 per property times 21, you've got 21 of them, is 1.5 million. Your cash out, £17,500 times 21 is 367,500. So you could have lived off that if you wanted to. Your wealth at the end of year 7 is then 1.89. I think that's a ridiculous understatement because you'll have a lot of capital appreciation over a 7-year period. But look at your annual rent. Your annual rent, £6,000 per property profit times 21, £126,000. Now, most people could live on £126,000 a year. I put to you, that's not a small amount of money, is it? At the end of year 7, you could consider selling the 3 properties from year 1. Well, why would you do that? Well, you could then create extra pots of money to invest in property. So let's say you've got 4% capital growth for each of those 7 years, and the market value started at 290. Well, the price you would sell at would be 387,500. Now, again, these are really conservative numbers. So by the time you've repaid the mortgage, cash out from each transaction will be £170,000. And you probably think, well, what about tax, capital gains, this, that, and the other thing? Well, you need to learn about limited companies, you need to learn how to manage the tax, because professional landlords know all that stuff, and we can help you with that too. So that would generate enough money to do at least 2 extra £250,000 properties each time you did it. So instead of doing 1 property every 4 months, you'd actually now be doing 3 properties every 4 months. So instead of adding 3 a year, you're now adding 9 a year. This is like, woof, exponential growth, isn't it? So, I mean, it's your choice this year 8 onwards. You could either triple the rate at which you're growing your portfolio, if you wanted to, or how about this for a plan? You actually spend a bit of cash and enjoy yourself. How about that? I mean, it's up to you, but you know, if you fancy a holiday, a boat, a car, you know, whatever. So if you do that over this 10-year period, following that template, what you'll actually do is you'll convert your £50,000 starting money into 7.487 million. That's a little bit of difference, isn't it? So what's your plan? What's next for you? I don't know what you've got in terms of your head for the next 7 years, but what I know is this. If you would like to take the next steps to becoming wealthy through property, then just click on the link below and come and join us for 2 full days. And let's help you to take your next steps to become wealthy through property. You've been wonderful. I've been Paul. See you next time.